The Witch's Ghost and the Abandoned House. Our new house was a little bigger than our old one. Dad said he can finally have his own office now. Mom was daydreaming about which flowers she will plant this summer. Our dog Charlie was glad for the spacious backyard. It looked like only Bobby, my younger brother, and I noticed the creepy house next door. It was a rotten, creaky, old house. I would have thought it had been abandoned long ago, if not for the occasional shadowy flickers against the curtains. At night, Charlie would go to the window facing the neighboring house and bark at it. Dad said that Charlie was just barking at a raccoon that was digging around in the trash. Bobby might have believed him, but I didn't. Not for a second. Dad honked at Mom to hurry up, but she lingered in the house, reminding us not to forget to feed Charlie and not to go outside in the evenings until they get back from Grandma's house. I promised to look after Bobby and the dog, and Mom finally got into the car. "Hey, Thomas, let's go out for some candy," said Bobby as soon as our parents' car turned the corner. "You heard Mom. But, Thomas, please, it's Halloween." Most of our things hadn't been brought to the new house yet, and I didn't have many ideas on how to spend the weekend while our parents were away. So in about 10 minutes, we were standing on the porch of the neighboring house, ready to go trick-or-treating. I shivered as I stood in front of the cold, damp-looking house. It looked even scarier and sinister up close. The ivy that snaked all the way up the roof looked almost like octopus tentacles. The sound of creaking floorboards could be heard from inside the house, as if someone were watching us from the peephole, but wasn't opening the door. We soon got tired of just standing there, so we decided to move on. It was weird that no one was out and about on Halloween. It was as everyone was hiding away in their homes, too afraid to come out. They were also quite reluctant to open their doors to us, so we got barely any candy in the end. I was ready to head home with Bobby when I noticed a group of local kids. There was something off about them. They were all different ages and were dressed in very old-fashioned clothes, as if they were living in a completely different decade. Kids were pretty quiet. They didn't joke around or play around with each other. I decided to go up to them and introduce myself. It's important to make friends when moving to a new neighborhood. A ginger girl wearing a jean jacket stood out most from the crowd. She smiled and introduced herself as Sarah. "We're going to egg the witch's house. Want to come with us?" she asked. Anything is better than sitting at home with my brother, so I agreed. "What sort of witch is she?" The others told me that a long time ago, an evil witch had lived in this town, and she used to feed children poisonous cookies. The children's parents dealt with the witch and buried her in her own backyard. Since then, it's become a tradition for the local kids to egg her house. Bobby was very impressed by that story, but I just brushed it away. "It's just a story." I got a little freaked out when we arrived at the place. It turned out that the witch's house neighbored ours. If it really had been abandoned long ago, then whose shadow passed by the curtains every night? Afterwards, we wandered around some more with our new friends and then headed back home. I watched Sarah as she walked away with the group and didn't notice Bobby running off. I looked around and saw my brother on the porch of the old lady's house. He waved at me happily and held out a bowl. "You can't eat cookies you found on some dead lady's porch, Bobby. You don't know who could have left them there." I darted forward and just barely managed to snatch the bowl of cookies out of Bobby's hands. He pouted sadly when I threw the bowl into the bushes and dragged him back to the house. In the morning, I went out for a walk with the dog. It wasn't quite dawn yet, and there was a thick fog outside, so I was surprised to see Sarah standing in front of the old lady's house. She was standing in the driveway and watched the house, still as a statue. She didn't notice me. even when Charlie suddenly started barking loudly. I came closer and asked Sarah what she was doing there so early in the morning. "You should be careful, Thomas," she replied, not taking her eyes off the house. "Children in this house have died every year on the old lady's birthday. She'll keep taking children until her bones are cleansed with fire." Sarah shot me a grim look over her shoulder and walked away. I turned around to see what she was looking at, but I just saw Bobby standing at the window of our house. He waved at me and hopped down from the windowsill. I went back home feeling very unpleasant. There was something I really didn't like about Sarah's words. Maybe it wasn't just a ghost story and we were really living right next to a house that belonged to an evil witch. I remembered the others had said that she had been buried in her own yard, and a cold chill ran through me. Darkness began to fall, and I was feeling more and more anxious. Clouds hung low over the town, signaling a thunderstorm. The TV kept breaking up from interference. Charlie kept barking at the door that led to the backyard. I distinctly heard the sound of someone stomping around on our porch and walking under our windows. But when I looked outside, there was no one there. Bobby was pretty calm, a bit too calm. So I thought that I was just being nervous for no reason. I went into the kitchen to get some milk for me and Bobby, but when I went back into the living room, Bobby wasn't there. The front door was ajar. I immediately ran outside. I rushed around the street and called out Bobby's name. My voice eventually became hoarse and my legs tired. Bobby couldn't have gone that far in such a short period of time. Right then, I realized there was only one place I hadn't looked for him. The trees danced in the wind, casting crooked shadows on the old lady's house, making it look even uglier than it already was. Our street was well lit with street lamps, but that house almost swallowed up the light around it. It looked like a black hole among a row of neat, colorful houses. Still calling Bobby's name, I walked around the old lady's house and heard the sound of a child whispering. I pushed aside some bushes and saw my brother sitting on the grass. He was picking at the ground with a stick. "Why'd you run away? You're driving me crazy!" I grabbed him by the elbow and tried to pull him out of the bushes, but he awkwardly pulled his hand back and gave me such a frightened look that a chill ran down my spine. "Thomas, she's here," said Bobby, poking at the ground with his stick. I climbed through the bushes and started pushing aside the fallen leaves. My hands touched something cold and hard. It was a large, flat rock with a single word carved into it. Witch. I broke into cold sweat as I realized that I was sitting on top of someone's grave. I jerked back and quickly crawled out from the bushes. "Let's go, Bobby," I said in a shaking voice. That's when I realized that my brother had disappeared again. This is crazy. I immediately rushed off to look for him. This time I found him pretty quickly. I saw him on the old lady's porch. Suddenly, the enormous front door swung open, like the hungry jaws of a monster. A gnarled old hand reached out from inside the house. It grabbed Bobby by the collar and dragged him inside. I screamed and ran onto the porch, kicking and punching at the front door. But the door didn't budge. I got out my phone and called 911. They answered the call and I immediately told the officer that an old lady had kidnapped my little brother and is keeping him in her house. But as soon as I told them the address of the house, silence fell on the other end of the line. "Is this another joke? That woman died long ago. The house is abandoned, son." They hung up. I have to free Bobby myself. I found a heavy rock and threw it at the window. On my second attempt, I managed to break the glass and climbed inside. The house was dark and a little colder than on the street. The old, dusty furniture had remained in the rooms. The townsfolk had been so afraid of the old lady that no one had dared to enter the house after she had died. Flinching at the slightest sound, I looked through the rooms, calling out Bobby's name. The floorboards creaked under my weight, and long shadows crept up the walls. I heard my brother's voice. I could hear him crying quietly, but I couldn't see him anywhere. I soon realized that I had to find some other way to save him. I left the house. I found a shovel and a small canister of petrol in my dad's garage. I was certain that I didn't have much time, so I made sure to quickly dig up the old lady's grave, trying not to look at the bones. I doused them in petrol and set them on fire. Red-hot flames blazed in the grave, slowly burning the bones inside. I was a bit worried that the bushes might light on fire, but I forgot about that when a black skeletal hand ripped out of the ground. That's not possible. The hand grabbed my leg and started pulling me downwards. Shit! I managed to land a well-aimed kick, and the hand retreated. But more hands popped out of the ground. More and more hands coming from all directions. They grabbed me by the legs and ripped my pants. I fell and the hands wrapped around my wrists and neck, even grabbing me by the hair. I wriggled and squirmed, trying to break free, and suddenly realized that the hands were pulling me into the burning grave. I dug my nails into the ground, but I could only leave deep scratches in my wake. The hands kept pulling me into the burning pit. Suddenly, a couple of raindrops fell on my face. There was a loud rumble of thunder, and in a second it started pouring with rain. The ground became muddy with water. The blackened hands weakened their grip. I was able to break free and crawl into the bushes. From my hideout, I watched as the skeletal hands sank back into the ground. The fire continued for a while, even with the torrential rain. Soon, everything was over. I heard Bobby's voice. He ran from the door and hugged me around my waist, whimpering in fear. I patted his head with my dirty hand and got up to head home. It's all over, Bobby. Everything's okay. Bobby stopped crying once we got home. He just looked ahead with glassy eyes, not saying a word. I decided to cheer him up and made us both a sandwich. We'd both been scared out of our wits and were really tired. Instead of eating, Bobby asked to go to bed. I ate quickly and also tried to go to sleep, but Charlie's barks kept me up the whole night. As dawn approached, I got up to give him a walk. He was circling around the back door again. What an impatient dog, I grumbled and let him out of his leash. I wondered what Charlie was so worked up about. He immediately ran towards the flower bed and started barking even louder than before. I felt my heart drop. I slowly walked towards the dog and fell to my knees. In amongst the flowers and fallen leaves lay Bobby's cold body. I have been lying there since that night I ate those cookies, Bobby said guiltily. But that's not all. You ate the cookies too. I screamed and ran into the house. Charlie continued to bark at Bobby's body. I shook my head, finding it hard to keep my balance. And that's when I saw myself sitting motionless at the kitchen table. Instead of a sandwich, cookie crumbs were scattered around my lifeless body. Trying to process what was happening, I heard Bobby call to me from the street. He was standing on the porch, holding a wrinkled old woman by the hand. Instead of a face, she had a charred, blackened stump. Sarah and the other kids stood behind them. A strong wind passed through them and through me. "Let's go, Thomas. We'll come back here next year," said Bobby without opening his mouth.